So, I've been replaying Wreckfest for the past few days, and it's not exactly living up to my memory nor the positive ratings it has on Steam. I love a good derby game. I still enjoy playing Flatout series where crashing into things felt more rewarding and actually helped winning the race. This mainly because in Flatout you have nitros and crashing rewards you. But Wreckfest? It feels sluggish, like you're driving through a swamp half the time. I was expecting a high-octane thrill ride like I remembered and read reviews, but instead it's more like a Sunday drive through the countryside, and not in a good way. Credit where credit is due, the car's destruction physics are superb visually, and when destruction happens, it looks fantastic. Overall, the visuals in the game with all its destructible environment is beautiful and natural. First of all, the driving itself lacks any real sense of urgency. I played a lot of racing games in my past, and with most of them, you can feel the speed, the adrenaline kicking in when you nail a corner. But in Wreckfest, it's like you're constantly fighting against the car. The cars feel heavy and unresponsive. Whether I'm driving a beat-up station wagon or a souped-up buggy, it all feels the same. Sluggish. There's no real sensation of speed, which is a huge letdown in a game that's supposed to be all about intense racing and destruction. Instead of feeling like I'm on the edge of control, it's more like I'm trying to steer a tank through a swamp. The demolition maps are another big disappointment. Compared to the Flatout series, they just feel flat. There's no creativity or excitement to them, especially and even when driving with buses or harvesters. In Flatout, the demolition events were pure chaos with more destructible environments that made smashing into other cars a blast. Nitro and destruction rewarding you being a huge part of it. In Wreckfest, the arenas feel generic and lack any real personality. Sure, you can crash into other cars, but it doesn't have that same satisfying crunch or sense of mayhem. It feels like they toned down the chaos to make it more accessible or something, but in doing so, they suck the fun right out of it. Another issue I have is with the variation in levels, or more accurately, the lack of it. After a few hours, you start to realize you're driving on the same tracks over and over again. There are only so many times I can race through the same dirt track before it gets old. The lack of variety is frustrating because it feels like the game is just padding itself out with repetition. And speaking of repetition in some races, you're forced to do up to 12 laps. The races already feel slow and repetitive, and then they go and drag them out for way too long. It's like they're trying to bore you into quitting. What's worse is that Wreckfest insists on throwing you onto the same maps over and over again. It feels like you're constantly racing the same handful of tracks on a loop. The first few times it's fine, but by the time I've seen the same map for the 5th time, I'm done. Even the destruction events, which are supposed to be the game's big selling point, start to feel like a chore after a while. There's only so much mindless crashing I can do before it loses its charm. At the end of the day, Wreckfest just doesn't have that thrill factor that a racing game should have. It's missing that sense of speed, that excitement that comes from being on the edge of losing control, but somehow holding on. The demolition derby aspect, which should be the most fun part of the game, feels watered down and uninspired compared to older games like Flatout. If you're looking for a high-energy, adrenaline-pumping racer, you're probably going to be disappointed with Wreckfest.